To the January 26th, 2021 Lane County Board of Commissioner meetings. Going to our agenda, which is on the screen for those of you watching or able to later. Number one, are there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, is there any emergency business? Hearing none and seeing on my screen Mr. Mokrahajski shaking his head no. Before we begin public comment today, I was going to ask Mr. Mokrahajski to share some very current and topical news. It's good news. We wanted as many people to hear it as possible. And then after his statement, I would appreciate any input from Commissioner Buck, and then we'll begin public comment.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. We wanted to just provide an update on a notification we received yesterday from FEMA that FEMA has approved Lane County's request for a direct housing mission following the September's wildfire in the Mackenzie River Valley. As the board recalls, we had made this request to FEMA. FEMA denied the request, and then we appealed. This is a really big deal, and what it means essentially is the housing assistance that comes from this direct housing mission will allow FEMA to provide a range of temporary housing options for those affected by the wildfires, including transportable temporary housing units, direct lease and multifamily lease and repair. The housing assistance for qualified individuals and households may be available for up to 18 months from the date of the disaster declaration. We still have approximately 170 of our residents who are staying in 11 different hotels and motels in the community because they've been displaced by the fire. So it's really those folks that we're looking to serve. This will be on top of, as the board knows and has taken action to approve moving forward with our request for funding through Project Turnkey at the state. This is in addition to that, and really adds to the pool of resources that we have to be able to provide adequate housing assistance for people that have been affected. We continue to actively identify proper sites, and one of our goals is really to get people who've been displaced from the fire back into their community. That most of these folks are in hotels and motels that are outside of the Mackenzie River Valley, and it's really important that they get closer to the community that they're from, that is their home. So we want to share that with the board. We just were notified yesterday, and I want to just take a moment to recognize the folks involved. First of all, the Board of Commissioners for pursuing the appeal, and I think the board was unanimous. It also was felt really strongly that we needed to fight the original decision by FEMA, that it wasn't right, that we did have a significant impact, that were people displaced, and we needed this designation. Heather Buck, in particular, commissioner from East Lane County, who's been actively involved in fire response work, really for her advocacy and partnership with our federal delegation, participating in numerous meetings to really lead that effort. At the staff level, I need to particularly call out Alex Kyler, who I will tell you, there were a number of folks who felt like, we have so much going on with the pandemic and the wildfire recovery work. Like, an appeal takes a lot of time to do. And Alex is one of these people. Alex has a hard time letting things go. And he was one of these people that felt really strong, like, we need to fight this. We can fight this. And he was right. And he did, not only did he say that, but he was one of the key people that really did a lot of the appeal work, did a lot of the partnership and advocacy with our legislative delegation. So Alex Kyler deserves a lot of credit for this. Patience Winningham, Austin Ramirez, and Dan Hurley as well for their work on the submission of the appeal. Our partners at the Oregon Emergency Management for their support. Of course, our federal delegation for supporting the appeal. We had a meeting with Senators Wyden and Merkley several weeks ago. Commissioner Buck sort of facilitated that meeting, and we really hit home the point about we need FEMA to review this appeal and reconsider, and they understood the issue and they took it very seriously, and they took a leadership role in that. So Senators Merkley, Wyden, and Congressman DeFazio, our lobbyist Smith Dawson Andrews for their help in navigating the appeal process. Alex Kyler sent me an email this morning from Congressman DeFazio's staff on the committee where, Alex was saying, thank you for all your help and everything. And the staff person responded and said, hey, listen, we were there to step up this really was Lane County leading the charge. You all did the work and you really had. So just wanted to share all that and say thanks to all the folks that were involved. And I know Commissioner Buck, you probably have some additional things that you'd like to share in terms of your involvement and a lot of these discussions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mokryski. This is a really important, vital step for our McKenzie folks getting back upriver. I want to congratulate the wildfire victims that are going to be able to be rehoused in more stable environment upriver. This is what they've been advocating for all along, that we at the county have been pushing and supporting them with. I got the call yesterday afternoon on my drive home from work, and it was an exciting moment to hear. I first got the call from Congressman DeFazio's office. They did a great deal of advocacy. Thank them so very much, and the congressman himself. I too want to thank our Senators Wyden and Merkley, who made the calls when we needed them to make the calls, and that helped quite a bit. I look forward to working through the process of actually getting the housing up and running, but specifically we are finding housing that's actually upriver in the area in which they had to be displaced due to the fire. And that's what's most important. People just want to be home. And this will help folks that really don't have many other ways and can't afford to get back upriver. So I want to thank our staff. Fantastic job, and appreciate all their hard work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other commissioners may want to weigh in on this. I'm going to request, if it's all right, that we do that, because I'm one of those in remonstrances. So with no further ado, I see no hands. Let me read us into that. With this virtual format, some housekeeping items. To the public watching, you are currently registered in this meeting system as attendees. Attendees are webinar participants who are audience members viewing the meeting. Your microphone and webcam are automatically muted as attendees. There will be a time in the meeting right now when it's open for public comment. At that time, if you wish to participate in public comment, I'll ask you to raise your virtual hand to be recognized. You should see a hand icon on the device you are using to watch the meeting. Press the hand icon once to raise your hand. If you press it a second time, you will mute yourself. When public comment begins, our meeting organizer will call names. When your name is called, you will be unmuted and given 3 minutes to make your public comment. When your 3 minutes are up, you will return to muted status and the next person will be called. You can then continue to watch the webinar as long as you so choose. The intent, obviously, is for everyone wishing to make public comments, for us to be as inclusive as possible, and you to have that opportunity. But note that if there are more people wishing to speak than allotted time allows, we may have to either limit the number of speakers or reduce the time allotted per speaker. We don't anticipate that. With that, Diana, do we have anyone that wants to provide public comment?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. At this time, I do show a few people have registered as attendees for the meeting. If you would like to present public comment, please raise your virtual hand at this time and I will call upon you. I do see some hands going up. Our first speaker will be Jacqueline Rice, followed by Joe Mall. Jacqueline, I will unmute you and I will begin your timer and you may begin your public comment. Jacqueline, I do show you are self-muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, commissioners and staff, I thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk today. My name is Jacqueline Rice and I reside in the Mohawk Valley. I support a ballot measure to create a Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District. In 2018, a group of Mohawk Valley citizens met several times to discuss traffic safety due to some tragic traffic fatalities on Marcola Road. We learned that rural Lane County, including Marcola Road through the Mohawk Valley, had one of the highest rates in the state in terms of annual traffic fatalities. We also learned that rural Lane County had virtually no rural traffic enforcement due to budget cutbacks in the Sheriff's Department and little resource to respond to property crimes. In March of 2018, the group presented its report to the commissioners. Since that time, there have been some engineering improvements such as rumble strips, thank you, but no increase in funding for law enforcement for the valley. Property crimes also continue to increase. In recent weeks, at least 2 perpetrators were caught on trail cam committing apparent vandalism or theft. Residents posted these on the local Facebook group requesting ID by the group members. While the videos and photos may have been submitted to the sheriff's office, there is likely no resource to follow up. During the recent snowstorms and wildfires, there was no dedicated deputy with in-depth knowledge of the valley, including all the side roads and isolated properties, elderly and high-risk medical patients, as well as local criminals and felons looking to take advantage of the situation. Also, after the fire evacuations, some citizens voluntarily patrolled the valley with no oversight and no law enforcement who could come quickly if the citizen patrol spotted something amiss. I believe the benefits to the Mohawk Valley of the law enforcement district and having a community deputy include, but are not limited to, the following. Number 1, vastly improved traffic enforcement resulting in reduced fatalities. Number 2, reinstitution of aggressive property crime investigation, which could have the effect of catching and punishing more of these thieves and vandals. Number 3, creation of relationships within the community between law enforcement and citizens. Tips would increase since residents would trust action would be taken by the community deputy. Knowing the area and residents would help the deputy investigate crimes more effectively. Informal welfare checks on elderly and disabled citizens, reducing the criminal in training environment that exists in rural areas. While there is no financial price you can put on a prevented traffic fatality, the savings of an overall reduction in property crime could be substantial. In my opinion, the small cost per month is a small trade-off for the numerous benefits. I urge the commissioner to take whatever action necessary to get this on the ballot and support it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I will call upon Joe Mall to give public comment. I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Mr. Mall, you will be followed by John Tilcullen. I do show you are self-muted.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me now? Hey. Chair Bernie and fellow commissioners, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you again this morning. I just want to voice my support for a project in an afternoon agenda discussion item 12A, the potential transportation and growth management community assistance opportunity for Blue River Community Plan. That's a mouthful, and the work it represents is a handful, or rather many hands full. Highway 126 is clearly an important transportation corridor along an increasingly valuable water resource. The proposed project is a good approach for considering options for reimagining the communities along that corridor and within that watershed. We like it because it includes consideration of incentives to individual landowners. Their decisions about where to live and how to live, where to rebuild, and how to rebuild long-term have impacts on their neighbors upstream and downstream, including all of us here in the Springfield and Eugene metropolitan areas. It's in our collective interest to support with an eye towards that collective benefit. That said, I know, and I expect you hear frequently, that people upriver who have lost their homes and lost their physical, visible communities are frustrated. The pace of cleanups, the restoration of power and telecommunications, continued removal of trees along the highway, drivers who ignore the reduced speed zone signs, any number of things are adding to this frustration. And it's not surprising. It's an unfortunate, likely unavoidable consequence following a disaster like we had in September. But people came together then in remarkably creative and selfless ways to help each other out, oftentimes by simply taking the time to hear each other out. So as you consider projects like the one before you this afternoon centered around Blue River, which again, we strongly support, I encourage you to continue your investments of staff time and money in ways that can bring people together to share their ideas for that whole 50-something mile long community. Reimagining and rebuilding the McKenzie Valley is not just a technical challenge of navigating the land use code and the engineering limitations of reconstruction. We need ways for people to gather, voice their concerns, share their ideas, and work together. I know you are doing that with state and federal partners, and I simply want to thank you for that and encourage your continued investment in it. I'm grateful again for your willingness as commissioners to keep working at this difficult task, and even more grateful for the staff of Lane County who are out there again today, working with the many good people who are vested in that river and in the community's future. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. At this time, I will call on John Kilcullen. Mr. Kilcullen, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. One moment, let me get the timer reset. I do show you are self-muted, Mr. Kilcullen. Excuse me, Mr. Kilcullen.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Kilcullen. I've lived in the Lane County for almost 70 years, a very strong supporter of law enforcement. Grew up in Cresswell and was honored to join the Lane County Sheriff's Office when I was 21. Served there about 13 years before going to law school. I'm now a retired attorney. I moved to the Mohawk Valley 9.5 years ago in order to be closer to my granddaughters and daughter-in-law after my son was killed. The main purpose, I believe, of law enforcement is to support and keep the community safe. And the best way to accomplish that is to have an officer who is assigned to a particular area. They get to know the area, they get to know the residents, and they get to know what needs to be done at any particular time. Equally important is the fact that the community gets to know the officer. They feel more comfortable going to an officer that they know rather than just talking to somebody that is on the other end of the phone. Community policing, I believe, is a very, very effective way of protecting the community. I have a couple of experiences that support my view of why I think community policing and having a full-time deputy to an assigned area is effective. First, you may recall back in 1972, Kurt Van Thurston was shot and killed down in Cresswell. The chief at the time, Don Brownell, decided to withdraw or resign. I was the first deputy assigned down there. I found it very effective to be the one deputy down there that the whole community would be able to go to and had trust in me and helped me get my job done. I had a similar experience working in the North Eugene High School region of 4J, where I was on the police school court team back in the mid-70s, got to know students, administrators, and teachers, and found that to be a very effective mechanism for solving difficult problems, both in the school and in the community. In short, having a full-time deputy in the Mohawk Valley would improve our safety and effectiveness of law enforcement and would be a great benefit to the community to know that there is an officer assigned to them, and similarly for the officer to know that he can contact any particular individual for assistance in a program. I encourage you to assign and fund a deputy to work the Mohawk Valley on a full-time basis. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Kilcullen. At this time, I do not show any others have signed up for public comments, so I will return the meeting to you, Chair Burney.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone that made comments. Are there commissioners that would like to make remonstrances and or other comments, statements? Commissioner Farr, did I see your hand up?
Not at this time, Chair.
Blame it on the eyes. Any concerns at all at this time? Someone has their microphone on. It's very loud. It went off. It's off now. No other commissioners would like to make a remonstrance? Commissioner Farr.
We would all like to be last, I believe, Chair. In our rush to be last, we held our arms down.
That's exactly right, Commissioner.
I just briefly on Mr. Mokrahaiski's revelation, speak of the news regarding housing up in the Mackenzie. It really is all boots on the ground, and having this opportunity to have a greater resource to provide the infrastructure necessary for not just for immediate and emergency housing situations, housing accommodations in the valley, but moving into transitional and permanent housing, finding ways to put front doors on properties that have been devastated as quickly as possible. It's just exciting, Mr. Mokrahaiski, that you're able to report the news at that point in time. The coalition of your staff that came together to make this happen is remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Good morning, everyone. I was partly hesitating because I'm still learning the right time on our agenda to make comments about certain topics. So I'll reserve my comments about the public safety measure for the sheriff's presentation this afternoon. But I did want to let folks know, I know all of us have received many messages from community and this wonderful and important news from FEMA providing emergency assistance for a particular group of folks who are experiencing homelessness right now is welcome and important, but the ongoing crisis of folks who are unhoused in our community continues. I know that we as a county and as a partner with other jurisdictions are doing a lot of really heavy lifting and hard work, but it's simply not enough. And I know we all know that, but I wanted to be sure that anyone watching knows that we know that. And that I am really excited as your new commissioner and with some of my new committee assignments to do everything I can to bring a sense of urgency and pragmatism to address this. To that end, to my colleagues, I also wanted to make sure that you hear from me first directly. Some of you may have heard there's a group of folks in our community who are exploring maybe some long-term solutions to some of our funding constraints around addressing this issue for the longer term. And I've been invited to participate with a group exploring some options. And as that firms up and I get more information, I'll be happy to report back and talk about those efforts, but wanted to let you know that I will be participating because I know funding is only one of the many barriers that we face to addressing the needs of our unhoused neighbors. And I think I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. Great news about FEMA and the appeal, but I want to address a little bit different housing today. I want to make note that we are going to begin moving people into the MLK Commons project here shortly, or I should say Homes for Good is. And I just want to note that is a project that's been a long time coming. And it's a project that is looking at a much more permanent solution to our homeless problem in the way it addresses it. And it's something that started way back in the Public Safety Coordinating Council, believe it or not, when EPD presented to us about their top 100 users list that they've been keeping track of the number of people that they most frequently came in contact with. And it kind of brought up the idea of who's the top 100 users of jail bookings? Who's the top 100 users of our ER room at, and at Mackenzie Willamette, at Peace Health? Who's the top 100 people that Eugene Springfield Fire responds to? And it birthed something called the FUSE project, the Frequent User System Engagement Project, where we ran a pilot where we combined these lists between agencies and picked the top 100 users of all these emergency services and tried to reach out to them and get them housing. And what we found through that project was those heavy users of emergency services were responsible for about $65,000 a year in public resources. But if we could house them through this project, it was only costing us about $14,000 a year. And that birthed the idea of the MLK Commons, where we were going to reach out to these high utilizers of services and provide them housing and intensive case management at the same time. And over the years, we've put together an incredible group of people to fund this, and it was recognized even by the healthcare industry how important it was to address these high utilizers. So we even got money from, the hospital. We got money from Trillia. It was an amazing effort of the community to put it together. And what's really great is after that concept got started probably 8 years ago in PSCC, when the city of Eugene brought up this frequent user list that started this slow movement to birthing this idea. In February, we were going to start housing residents at that facility. And I just want to say it's a great thing. And, Vice Chair Farr has been a longtime champion of housing for homeless people. And for me, it's really great because I've been a long-time advocate of the need to get this permanent supportive housing tied to intensive case management. I just want to say it's a great thing that's going on, and I'm looking forward to that grand opening of MLK Commons.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other remonstrances? I saw Commissioner Farr's hand up, but Commissioner Buck, I did not know if you had anything at this time.
Commissioner Farr, did you want to go first?
Only briefly to say welcome to Captain Riley and Sheriff Harold, who are on the conversation right now. You heard some outstanding testimony from people who are advocates for a project that you are putting a great deal of effort into. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck? Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on, I'm so glad that Commissioner Vosevich brought up the MLK Commons because we are all getting to get a tour here soon before it's filled. And just wanted to note that the concept came real early on in housing nonprofit world. About 15 years ago, when I was working with St. Vinny's, we were driving around trying to find locations for this. It was actually Housing First was named something different back then. And it was so wonderful to see over the years how the political will has, really gathered behind the concept. And I look forward to seeing people in there and recovering through all their housing needs and other issues that kind of are just tentacles off the housing and homelessness issue in general. And I want to thank those people that spoke earlier as well. They were all about issues either in the Mohawk or Mackenzie area in my district. I'm very supportive of what they said, and we'll talk about that later when we get to those subjects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. My turn. I'm learning how to wait my turn. It doesn't come intuitively. Ms. Rice, Mr. Mole, and Mr. Kilcullen, I wanted to simply thank you for your comments. I'm going to, I think I can speak for myself. I feel like speaking for the group, but speaking for myself, I don't think there's any points you made that I don't also support. And as you know, they're coming on later in the agenda. For those that discussed safety in the McKenzie corridor, you do know that this Board of Commissioners has already gone into its reserve to provide the sheriff with extra enforcement officers at his request, because we recognize those things. I also wanted to have a different take. Delighted, Mr. Mokrahajski, with and Commissioner Buck, with the news from FEMA that we got last night. You know, all this thanking people and all of the different actors that help reverse a decision, I just want to point out, we had to reverse a decision. Everyone had to do their jobs because a decision was made by a federal agency that in this area, with, if not the, one of the most constrained housing markets in the United States, where there is a huge delta between affordability and ability to purchase at every income level. And then after this massive wildfire, we received news that FEMA declined our request for a housing mission. So what we saw was local and state and federal actors, agencies, electeds come together, help FEMA come to a correct decision. And it was a beautiful thing to observe government working and in action. I simply wanted to point that out. Are there any other remonstrances before we move forward on the agenda? Thank you. And I'm not going to reiterate, because all the comments made by commissioners I felt were just spot on. Thank you, commissioners. Item number 5, COVID-19 response and recovery. This is an item that we have at every meeting now until we are through this. Mr. Mokrahajski and Mr. Adams, I believe you're up.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and Steve Adams is with us. We don't have slides today because we have a little less time this morning. We'll have a little more time with you next week on this topic. Mr. Adams is working at the mass vaccination clinic, day 4 of our mass vaccination clinics today. And so he's found himself a place that he can present from. And so I'll just make a couple of introductory comments here for you. First, to say that by the end of today, we believe that we will have vaccinated nearly 8,000 people at 6 mass vaccination clinics in the past 2 weeks. The total number of people in Lane County that's been reported in the state system is 19,641 compared to 263,160 total Oregonians. So that's just under 8% of the total state number, and Lane County is about 9% of the state population. So we're just under per capita where we should be, but our numbers have been ticking up thanks in large part to this last week where we did get a larger influx of vaccine supply from the state. And so it's really incredible. Approximately 8,000 doses administered in 6 large events over the past 2 weekends. I had the opportunity, I've been at both, been able to be at the last 2 weekends events. And I just want to say, these large scale events are really challenging to pull off, particularly when we're told on a Friday how much vaccine we get and for what populations it's for. And then we have to, within a matter of days, pull together an event or series of events, coordinate all the logistics of that, get the scheduling out. And then in this last week, coordinate getting 6,000 people at these last 4 days there. So it's a huge logistical challenge. And I just have been blown away at the coordination and the partnership between, the folks here in Lane County, public health, CHCs, the developmental disabilities, search and rescue, emergency management, all our folks in Lane County that have stepped up to do that work in partnership with the University of Oregon, with volunteers from the community, with our healthcare community. It's really, with Oregon National Guard, these last 4 days who've assisted us has really been incredible. So I could go on and on about that, but I want to just say how smooth and orderly and effective and efficient those events have been to date. It's not been without some challenges, and we want to acknowledge that we know that many people are confused and frustrated by both the limited supply as well as the changes in eligibility that continue to happen. We share that frustration. We continue to advocate to the state for more supply, and we know the supply to the state has been limited, but we've done a little bit better in getting more supply from the state. We continue to advocate for not continual changes in eligibility, and we're working through that, those pieces. So Mr. Adams is going to walk through kind of a little more detail on these last 4 days, where we're at with the pandemic in terms of numbers generally, and then what the plan is for this upcoming week with vaccines, particularly focused on the education community. Steve?
Thank you, Steve. Chair Birdie and commissioners, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you as always. Please excuse my casual attire. I'm here at the Vax Clinic. It has been underway now for 37 minutes, and I'm going to dash back out to help keep things moving. Beginning with our numbers, as of this morning, 8,860 total cases, positive cases of COVID-19 in Wayne County since the beginning of the pandemic. That's an increase of 58 positive cases within the last 24 hours. We have been running a new 1,000 cases every 13, 14 days for the last few weeks. And we are, it looks like maybe that's beginning to slow down just in some of the new cases. We currently have 27 people hospitalized in Lane County, 6 of whom are in ICU. Our hospital capacity remains very good. So we continue to do a good job in terms of protecting our healthcare sector with all of our combined efforts. We are holding firm at 113 confirmed fatalities from COVID-19, and we've not seen any increase since late last week. We just received the extreme risk category data from OHA for Lane County. We are being advised that there is no change in our extreme risk categorization for large counties. You'll recall the last time I presented to you, we were our cases per 100,000 were in the 250.7 cases per 100,000, and our latest data are showing 283.5 cases per 100,000. So that is the metric that is keeping us in the extreme risk category. And you'll recall that we need to get below 200 per 100,000 in order to kind of move down. Our test positivity rate has improved. It's 3.6%, kind of compared statewide, 5.5%. And from my last report to you, that's down from 4.8% in terms of test positivity. Moving now to the vaccine process. So I'm pleased to report that for the first 3 days here of our 4-day drive-through clinic, we have administered 4,697 first doses of Moderna to a wide range of phase 1A recipients, but with a particular focus on the kind of group 2 category, which includes intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have our goal today is 1,300 doses. And if I can get 1,363, that will get me to an even 6,000. So I think that's a bit of a stretch goal, but we're going to push it today. And we're really trying to up the throughput. We could not have done this, but for our partners here in Wayne County, the University of Oregon has been incredibly helpful in detailing their logistics expertise and support. So the same talent that produces the Olympic trials and Odds and Game Day have been here helping us put on this event, and it's an incredible group effort to make this happen. We certainly have had some lessons learned throughout the process and some issues that we have been working to address. As noted, we were really focusing this week. We were really wanting to get a very heavy representation of intellectual and developmental disabilities, those serving them and those providing care for them, and those individuals themselves. And it's a very diffuse population, and in terms of trying to reach out and identify them. Our tactic last week was to reach out to as many of the organizations that we could identify that provide services to those in the community, and ask them to help us with the outreach to get folks registered. And we provided a registration link. And we were quite clear in our text, our prose of our email, that this was, remaining a high prioritization. We're still in phase 1A. This is not for general population. And yet we found as the week progressed, and I saw a couple of instances of this in which individuals forwarded to me an email, like kind of a giant community game of telephone. So you saw 4 or 5 forwards, and the final iteration that got forwarded to me was register here for mass vaccination, right? So we also learned that someone had posted the link to Facebook last week as well. And so it became a major challenge for us. So we took down the site and we made some adjustments to the registration process to make it even more abundantly clear that we're still in a very high priority phasing process, that we're not open yet to seniors or to folk in the general population. That has caused some challenges for us this week, but certainly a lesson learned in terms of managing that process. I really have to kind of, really hold up some of our staff and team members who worked extra hours late last week and early, over the weekend to help us kind of fix and address this issue and to ensure that we were getting the appropriate phase 1A people into this clinic. So our Pfizer allocations this week and Moderna allocations for our vaccine have come through. And of course, you all, I'm sure, have seen news that as of yesterday, this phase 1B group became eligible for vaccination. So phase 1B, as defined by the governor, includes K through 12. And they have indicated that that's not just teachers, but all staff. So bus drivers and lunch personnel and other support staff. It also includes early learning providers, and it includes certain childcare providers. So this past week, or for this week, we got for the first time a dose allocation that has a specific earmark for K through 12 for that phase 1B sector. So Wayne County will be receiving 2,200 first doses of Moderna vaccine allocated directly to Wayne County. 1,700 of those doses are allocated specifically for this K-12 sector. And that leaves 500 doses for Wayne County to continue to try to catch up with the phase 1A group. Wayne County is also receiving 800 second doses of Moderna. So this enables us to complete the vaccination series for the first efforts. So this is the first round of second booster shots for folks that we previously vaccinated. There are no new Pfizer doses coming into Wayne County. Those have been coming primarily to the hospitals, neither prime nor boost. Eugene Springfield Fire Department received 1,000 doses of Moderna for the booster shot to continue to complete the first responder community, well beyond the Eugene Springfield Fire Department, I should note, and working right across the entirety of the county. And we're getting a number of, in the range of about 500 allocations, 500 doses allocated to 5 providers covering urgent care and primary clinics. So for a total of 2,300 boosts. So for your numbers, we're getting 2,200 new first doses this week, and we're getting 2,300 second doses. And that accounts for the entirety of a vaccine coming into Wayne County for this week. So for the K-12 sector, we've been working specifically with the districts to develop a transfer and plan to enable them to begin their process. The superintendents met early yesterday morning to, once they had final word of what their allocations were going to be, to determine individual school district priorities and how they were going to allocate those across the school districts. So they have been working through that process, and they are in the process of telling us specifically how many doses go to which location. So we will be making 5 specific allocations. Many of the larger school districts are going to take care of the vaccination of some of the smaller school districts. And we are also, they have identified a couple of pharmacies in Cottage Grove and in Creswell who will be taking care of folks locally, and then Peace Health, Peace Harbor out in Florence to take care of personnel within the Sayusaw School District. Where the guidance is still coming from the state in terms of, this K-12 population is pretty well understood. We understand who's getting that. The early learning and the childcare sector are still kind of forming. I think I probably have some guidance in my inbox that I can begin to dig through. But what I can tell you is that the guidance coming from state government is, particularly within that childcare community, is they are defining specific segments within that community that are going to be identified as within this 1B priority, and the rest will come at a later date, and probably under essential workers once we get through this period. Just in terms of gross numbers, we think there's 8,300 K-12 public school and charter school personnel that fall within this category. There's probably about 800 private schools that would fall within this category as well. And, in terms of the early learning and the childcare, we don't have a good number, but we're kind of guessing somewhere in the 10,000 range in terms of what we're looking at. And what we're understanding is that for the next few weeks, OHA will be providing us with a weekly allocation that will have a specific earmark for this 1B sector. And so we will continue to work with the school districts and with some of these other providers as we understand who they are and who's in and who's out, and developing plans for getting vaccinations to those individuals. And I think, Chair Bernie, that's my brief for you this morning.
Thank you, Steve. Next time we expect you to be much better dressed.
Thank you. I will be.
Remonstrances from commissioners, with the caveat that I'm being reminded we do have a 10 a.m. time certain. Commissioner Trieger. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Trieger.
Oh, I believe Commissioner Buck.
I believe so too, but my eyes, I called you for.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Thank you so much, Mr. Adams, for that report, for coming to us live from the scene. Really appreciate you taking time, and with our time certain and your time being so limited, I'll follow up either at next week's presentation with some very specific questions around some equity concerns that I know the community has on their mind that I would like to have addressed. I'll send you an advance email so maybe you can prepare next week. But I think for today, the most important thing for me to get some clarity of language from you so I can respond to folks is around the eligibility. And of course, just to echo what Mr. Mokrzycki stated, we're all frustrated. It's really a supply problem. If we had enough to vaccinate everyone, we would figure out how to mobilize a way to do that. The difference between vulnerability and risk for elderly folks because of the impact should they get the disease is very different than someone's vulnerability or risk because of their exposure, their increased exposure risk. And I think that is a subtle but important difference for the community, as much as we can do to help folks understand that, because people are really seeing this prioritization and thinking it's a discounting of the risk that elderly folks face in terms of what would happen if they got the illness, different from the exposure risk. That folks living independently who are elderly can avoid exposure risk in a way some of first responders, healthcare workers, and now teachers cannot. That said, I think it's also really important that we remember, and I don't know how you can address this, that the vaccine protects the vaccinated person, but it doesn't make that person less likely to be a transmitter of the virus. And so the concern for me around opening schools, I know this isn't our purview, but my concern is we're creating an increased sort of vector population. And that, again, this goes to the equity issue, particularly for kids who are going back home where elders live in their home, which is more likely to have multi-generational households in certain communities of color and other groups. So I have a real concern about the risk that we're placing folks who are doing everything right in terms of staying home and trying to minimize their risk by creating this increased exposure risk. But particularly if there's anything you can help us with language for talking to community about this difference in vulnerability and risk category and eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Forgive me, but please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I had the opportunity to come down and see the mass vax events this weekend, and everything looked like it was going like clockwork. So, I mean, people were getting in quickly, they're getting their shots, getting through, parking in the parking lot, had to stay until their 15 minutes was up. And it looked like it was running really smoothly. So just want to give my great thanks to you and all the staff. I know Mr. Mokrahowski was out there volunteering as well, trying to get people through. I had a very specific question though. There was a lot of paper happening at the site, which I believe the state requires, but I found that part really could easily be electronic, so there's not so much data entry requirement. Is there some kind of movement to that, so that a more online system?
Thank you, Chair Birdie. Commissioner Buck, indeed. Michael Brown, our tech wizard, has actually worked up, so there's a vaccine administration report, which is the official record that we have to capture, which is in paper. And Mike has been working on an electronic VAR, as we call it. It requires OHA approval, but that would indeed be part of our future workflow if we're able to get that approval. So we have made leaps and bounds in terms of our tech process. Last weekend for our first mass vax, we were literally working from paper check-in registries. This week we're doing an electronic kind of tablet. So we have tablets at the front and at the checkout gate, and it's actually incredibly helpful for us just to meter the people coming through the process. And one of the issues that we're really been struggling with is you've probably heard in the news that some of these vaccines are yielding additional doses beyond what the individual vial is labeled for. So I don't know until it's actually drawn how many doses I'm going to have at the end of the day. So there's always that end of day reconciliation process. And after 5 days of operations, we've learned a lot about how to better manage that process. We had many more issues with the Pfizer vaccine than we've had with the Moderna vaccine, but we're also now doing data collection at the tables to help us see those extra doses so we can better do that. But indeed, we think that an electronic VAR that we can push out and people can fill out, print and bring in, or if they submit it electronically, we're trying to figure out how that process could work. That would be tremendously helpful. We know that not 100% of the general public coming in would have access to electronics or that, so we'll always have to have paper backup. But we have talked about even having like an e-pass lane kind of a thing where we could dedicate some lanes for those that are fully electronic. We could do that work. It will require some additional tech within the tents as well. The nurse administering the vaccination, for instance, would have to likewise have a tablet to be able to enter information there. But we are thinking about that in the future, particularly as we get into larger populations that we're trying to vaccinate.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I'll be ever so brief, Steve. First off, thank you to the men and women of the Oregon Army National Guard, our local citizen soldiers who step away from their jobs to do their duty when called upon. Thank you to them. The 2nd Battalion of the 162nd Infantry is our local unit. Steve, just a quick question for you, and this will be a very quick one because I think I know the answer. I'm on our website right now. It says, how do I get vaccinated in Lane County? That's ever so many details there, but some very pertinent issues right at the very, very top. Who's eligible, when you're eligible, and how to become, how to get your, how to get in line, how to get your appointment. Just a quick question. Can we be pretty confident that that information on our website is up to date so that if people ask us, rather than try to give them the answers, say, go directly to our website, you can get answers far beyond I can give you in a short conversation?
Chair Bernie, thank you, Commissioner Farr, for that question. Yes, we are working as hard as we can to keep that updated. As you know, it shifts from day to day and from week to week, but we are doing our best to update that as soon as we learn new guidance or new details from the state. We've also really invested quite a lot of time, particularly over the last week. So when Governor Brown initially made her announcement about the 65 plus population becoming eligible, you can see the call center data in terms of the number of calls that are coming in. In talking to local hospitals and to local primary care providers, they're having the same issue. So we are really trying to invest in kind of forward-facing communications, and we continue to try to think of new ways where we can get the word out to people. So our PIO team is working very hard in trying to create some new tools and content. And we've been staffing our call center as well with updated talking points, sometimes almost on a new set of talking points on a daily basis to try to ensure that we're getting the best information out there. But in your interaction with the community, absolutely pushing them to that website we are doing our dead level best to ensure that that's the best available information that's there.
That's all for now, Chair Bernal. I'll have more thanks later in the meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Bozovich, did I see your hand up?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Chair. Steve, first of all, I just want to say thank you to you and our public health staff. You guys are doing an amazing job in tough circumstances with ever-changing criteria from who's allowed to stay open to who gets the vaccine. It's a tough job for you guys to be the end distributor of all that. My frustration is with the complete seemingly lack of using scientific evidence in this whole closures and vaccine priorities. I have friends in Texas that have gotten their vaccinations, and they're my age, in their 60s, because Texas chose to vaccinate old people first before educators, which kind of relieves the issue if you reopen schools of multi-generational families if the elder folks in the family have been vaccinated. New York has reopened their schools with a far higher case rate than prior to vaccination being available. So Las Vegas is choosing to reopen their schools because they've got a youth suicide epidemic going on. You know, our choices in this state have been almost inexplicable. Closing gyms with no evidence of transmissions in gyms, various other issues. Meanwhile, you can still go buy marijuana in the state from a pot shop. You can still go into a Costco with hundreds of other people for an hour or two at a time. That it just, our closures don't make sense. One of the interesting things I just noticed by doing a little math is if we had 313 less cases over the last 2 weeks, we would have been down a risk level, and our restaurants would have been open, and possibly our gyms. The problem I see, though, is I look at the self-reported case numbers from the University of Oregon. Now, mind you, the week ending dates don't exactly match. Theirs are the 11th and the 18th. I think we were a couple days later. Exactly 313 cases over those 2 weeks at U of O. Just a little bit of interesting, matchup of data there. but we've decided to close certain parts of our economy, yet we've left universities open, but we've closed K through 12. All of it just, it's so seemingly non-driven by science. It's frustrating and maddening to me. And I just have to thank you and your staff for working through all of that. And I'm not picking on U of O because they're actually been a very proactive and cooperative help in dealing with this pandemic, from supplying manpower for contact tracing to everything else. It just happens that those numbers work out exactly like that. So I don't need a call from the U of O right after this. It's just at the state level, I'm frustrated with the decision-making process from the governor's office and OHA and the decision to go teachers before seniors and to close gyms but leave Costco open. It's a lot of it just doesn't make sense, and it's frustrating to me. And I imagine it adds to your workload because sudden changes mean you have to explain those changes to the public when things aren't working out the way they thought they were going to. So I just want to appreciate you and your staff and the great work you're doing. My understanding of the mass vax clinics and looking at the photos that Chair Bernie posted on Facebook and all the descriptions I've gotten, it's been running really well, and you guys are doing a great job. So thank you for your work.
Just a couple of quick points. We're now past the 10 a.m. time for time certain. I want to thank Commissioner Bozovich for intentionally making sure I didn't say any dumb things in my comments because I don't get any. And I also want to point out, this is the first time Commissioner Bozovich has admitted that he's in the elderly category. So I thought that was interesting too. Let's move on. We're going to come back to item 6, Health and Human Services. Let's move on to our 10 a.m. time certain at 10:03. That's item 7A on our agenda, a report in the matter of presenting an audit of the local option tax levy fund that supports jail beds and youth services for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2020, and results of the comprehensive annual financial report. I believe we have several people, and Greg Rickoff, if you would take this, we would thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Commissioners, I'm Greg Rickoff, the Director of Operations. With me today is Jeannie Sun, Financial Services Supervisor. But perhaps more to the point, I'm being joined by Kevin Mueller-Lilly and Amanda McCleary-Moore from Moss Adams, our independent external auditors, who they will present the findings and communicate the results of the examination of the compliance requirements, commonly referred to as the audit, for fiscal year 20 and the local option levy funds to support jail beds and youth services. After the presentation by Moss Adams, we do have Sheriff Harold and Karen Gaffney from Health and Human Services joining us for comments as they choose or questions you might have about the program. One of the requirements of the ballot language is that an external auditor will annually present in a public forum an independent audit report to the sheriff and the Lane County Board of Commissioners to ensure accountability. The jail levy was first approved by voters in 2013. In May of 2017, voters passed a renewal. It covers fiscal years 2019 through 2023. As a reminder, all of the audit reports are posted on the Lane County website. Moss Adams completed their audit for the fiscal year ending in June 30th, 2020, and issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the basic financial statements of Lane County, which means the statements are fairly presented and in all material respects. On November 30th, 2020, Moss Adams issued the report of independent accountants on local option tax levy fund that supports the jail beds and youth services for the fiscal year. They also reported the county's comprehensive annual financial report. On December 10th, Moss Adams presented their findings to the Finance and Audit Committee. That means, of course, that Vice Chair Farr and Commissioner Bucks, this will be their second opportunity to participate in this presentation. On December 15th, the board accepted the CAFR and ordered it filed with the Secretary of State. Today, we present the findings of the local option levy to the board and the specific audit procedures performed. Following the discussion and questions on the jail levy, following the discussion and questions, we'll have a quick look at the CAFR. Now I'll turn it over to Moss Adams to present the report, followed by time for questions and comments of the board.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning to everyone. I'm here with my colleague, Amanda McCleary-Moore, who's partner with Moss Adams, and I'm going to share my screen to go over some of our, go over those results that Greg just talked about. Can everyone see that all right? So main things we want to talk about is the audit of the financial statements, give a quick update on the federal awards audit that includes the CARES Act money the county received, and then spend the bulk of the time talking about the tax levy engagement. Amanda, you want to first touch on the CAFR audit?
Sure. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay?
I hear you great.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so Greg did touch on this, but I'll just reiterate that we performed our audit under governmental auditing standards as well as U.S. auditing standards, and we issue an opinion over your financial statements based on our audit. So we were able to issue what is called an unmodified or clean opinion. So we were able to get comfortable that the financial statements were materially correct. And while I know that that has come as an expectation that you will receive these unmodified and clean opinions, I just wanted to highlight one thing really quick and just mention that while you do still receive this unmodified or clean opinion, you know, finance does a really good job at putting your financial statements together. They're quite complex. And I just wanted to give you a little kudos that your guys' financial statements are ones that I use as examples to others when others are looking for example disclosures or format or reporting. And so I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of kudos there that while you still do receive that clean opinion, you do a really good job in putting those financial statements together, and it's quite the job for your finance team. In addition to the opinion over your financial statements, we do issue 2 other audit reports. This first one is because we do audit under the governmental auditing standards. So you'll see that on the screen there as our GAGIS report on internal control. And so what this means is that we do, if we identify any sort of internal control deficiencies when putting together your financial statements, we have to evaluate those. If we believe that there is risk that there will be a material mistake as a result of an internal control deficiency, we're required to communicate that to you within this report, and it gets bound with your financial statements. Another level would be considered a significant deficiency, and that's just something that we feel that we need to communicate to the board. And for you guys, we were able to issue a report that had no financial statement reporting findings. That means we did not identify any internal control deficiencies that rose to the level of needing to be included in your report, as well as no compliance findings. So you have a number of laws and regulations that you have to comply with. If we identify any non-compliance issues, that also would get included in that report. The next report is because you guys are an Oregon municipality, you do have certain Oregon laws that you have to comply with. And under that, we actually have audit procedures that we have to perform over those items. Some examples would be your budget law, or use of gas tax funds, or procurement. And so we perform procedures over that. And we did identify one instance of non-compliance that was in the report, and that is related to an over expenditure in your budget process. So under Oregon law, if you're even over $1, you do have to report that in your financial statements and your note disclosures, as well as we call it out in our audit report. And I believe that was in your capital improvements fund over a debt service appropriation. And so, so we did have that one item, but we did not have any other instances of noncompliance to report. And then our last report that we would normally issue is over your federal awards. This year, because one of the federal programs that we needed to audit was, of course, the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The audit guidance for that did not come out until the end of December. So we are going to issue a separate package related to testing of your federal awards. In the current year, we're testing 5 of those federal awards. And based on all the procedures that we've performed so far, we don't have any instances of non-compliance to report or instances of internal control deficiencies over compliance, because within those federal awards, there are a number of compliance items that you have to comply with, and that's what we are testing as part of that audit. So we will be issuing a separate package that has the schedule of expenditures of federal awards as well as our report over those. If anything does occur, we will of course communicate that with you but at this point in time, we don't have anything to report. So good news there so far.
Thanks, Amanda. So on the tax levy engagement, I believe this is the 7th fiscal year that we've performed this engagement with the county. And just like all those prior years, we issued a clean opinion. So in our report, there's 2 components. The first is the local option tax levy fund reports the revenues and expenditures for FY20, those property tax dollars, and then how they're spent for jail services and critical use services. And we issued a unmodified clean opinion on that fund. The other component is when the county went out to voters, they made a number of assertions that said how they would ensure that the tax dollars were used for jail services and youth services. And we test those assertions, and I'll go through each of those. There's 6 of them. The first one is that there will be a separate fund, the local option tax levy fund, that will really account for the revenues and expenditures of the tax levy. I think that's really a good sign of transparency to the community so they can see how those funds are spent. Now, that was created in year 1, and we did test to see that the special revenue fund continued to be used for the tax levy. Also, we told the community that general fund dollars would continue to be used for jail services. It wouldn't just be tax levy dollars. And we were able to see that the general fund both budgeted to spend money and then executed that plan, and general fund dollars were used on jail services during FY20. 2 of the other points were really how the funds would be used to support the actual beds, both at the jail and at youth services. So we did go on site. We toured both the jail and the youth center. We saw that at least 255 jail beds were in operations during FY20, and then also 16 beds for detention and 16 for treatment at Youth Services Center. In addition to being on site, we did we did a sample of counts done throughout the year, and we saw that it appeared that both appeared to be operating as planned. The final 2 components of the assertion, one is the collection of the tax dollars and how those are going to be allocated between jail services and youth services. So for FY20, the county said that 91% would be for jail operations, 9% for critical use services. And we worked with the assessor, we worked with finance and administration, and we saw that that allocation was accounted for in that manner. And then for those prior years, there were times when the commissioners decided to change that allocation, and for any prior years, we saw that that plan was also allocated correctly. And then the final assertion is just that the local option levy fund would be audited as a major program as part of the county's CAFR audit, and we did that, and we issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the local option levy fund. So there's really 6 components to the county's assertion. There's also the schedule that reports the revenues and expenditures. We had no findings to report for FY20, so I think great news to report for the county. You know, and Amanda, I communicate to commissioners just a great feedback in working with county administration, assessor, health and human services, and the county sheriff during this engagement. And that's really what we wanted to talk about today. Turn it over to you for comment.
Thank you, Kevin and Amanda from Moss Adams. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And I'll not say very much at this point, although there's a great deal to be said about it. You know, when we first proposed the levy, we faced a daunting task. Locally, we had failed every single attempt to support public safety through additional funding for decades prior to this levy. And how did we convince people that that we could be trusted with this levy amount to the extent that they trusted it with the huge passage numbers? And Kevin and Amanda, what you're talking about, what you're reporting on today is the most important promise that we made, and the promise that everything would be fully accountable, and it would be accountable through auditing on a regular basis. And what you're providing today is a clean audit and a return on the promise that we made 7 years ago to the public surrounding the levy. You know, Captain Riley is with us. He's our jail commander. And the sheriff are with us. I'm going to ask them to talk a little bit, if you will, about what this has actually meant to being able to provide the type of services that we provide in the jail. Not incarceration services, but things that go beyond incarceration services, helping people to not recidivate, helping people to get through the time that they've been sentenced to jail in ways other than just being held back from the public. Hi, Captain Riley.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, the jail levy has been instrumental in us running the jail over here. Prior to the levy, I don't have off the top of my head the number of jail beds we had, but it was far less than what we have now. So having 382 local jail beds to be able to run people through the criminal justice system over here and deal with mental health issues, addiction issues, and folks stabilizing to serve their jail sentences has been, for the overall system, it's just crucial, and the levy is crucial to that. The levy brings in more than half of our corrections division budget, and so that allows the division to operate over here. So the levy has been crucial, and continuing that funding source is going to be crucial as we move into the future, especially with some of the grants that we just got, the impacts grant to bring mental health liaisons into the jail, to help get them prepared for court in hopes of eventually building a crisis center here in our community to divert people from here. Having the jail to get that going is crucial. And then also our MAP program, our medically assisted therapy program to deal with people's drug addictions, which drug and mental health disorders, as we've talked before, really drive the criminality that we see in Lane County, and particularly property crimes. So to keep the jail going, it's vital. Extremely vital.
Thanks, Captain Riley. And you touched on the issue regarding helping people to stabilize and to overcome addictions through the different treatment programs that you've been able to introduce. Only one more thing, Chair, because other commissioners would like to talk on this. When we made the initial promises, we promised, and I'm going to look at Commissioner Bozovic. Commissioner Bozovic introduced the youth element to the levy, and we received a clean audit on the youth element. I think that that really convinced people that we were not just wanting to put people in jail. We're wanting to make sure that people live lives that are both stable and satisfying to them and the people that they love and live around. So, you know, we're not just putting people in jail. Through this levy, we are actually changing people's lives and returning people into normal normal, stable lives. So Captain Riley, thanks very much for that. Others have more to say about this, but really the clean audit, Kevin and Amanda, I'm going to continue to use the words that you just said. I use you as an example when I talk to others. You use the example of our jail levy and the auditing that you provide for us when you talk to others about auditing. Thank you very much, Chair. A lot to be said.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to say I'm pleased to have another clean audit on the jail and youth services levy. Commissioner Farr is right. It was a uphill battle to get the first approval of the levy because there had been such distrust of government built in Lane County, starting from a past sheriff that I heard about as we were running the levy over and over again from years and years ago, that parked patrol vehicles on the street in a demonstration against a previous board diverting money meant for the sheriff's office to other uses. And that memory, that institutional memory in the community of a previous board diverting money was a very difficult thing to overcome. 20 years later, and 14 no's on prior requests for supporting public safety funding, we finally got a yes. And we did it because we added this element to it, which was we were going to have annual audits that were going to be third party and publicly put out so everybody could see that a third party had verified that the board didn't go in there and move money around. And that included the general fund support for the sheriff's office, where we wouldn't start, sucking money away in one place because we were getting new money in the form of a levy. And part of that is the guarantee in the number of beds that we promised in the levy in both youth services and the jail that are local beds. And it's just great to hear one more time a clean audit that we're doing exactly what we promised to do. And this was how we built trust with the community and trust back in Lane County government. In a time, shortly after some pretty large controversy about county and things that were not building trust relative to Lane County government. So this was the beginning of how we rebuilt that trust. And I just want to thank the auditors. I want to thank the sheriff's office. I want to thank youth services. I want to thank our financial services folks that do such a great job, that we are the example of helping us continue to maintain that trust with the public. That when they do give us additional funds, we are going to do exactly what they were intended to be done with those funds. And it does so much more. Like Commissioner Farr alluded to, having these funds allows us to do so much more with our community corrections dollars, with our justice reinvestment dollars, in the way of trying to really change people's lives that have come in contact with the criminal justice system, and do stuff that will proactively change their lives, reduce recidivism, and keep our community safe. And I just want to say this is just our once a year time to celebrate us doing those things well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there another commissioner that would like to say something? Looks like Commissioner Buck's cat might want to chime in here.
She does say, I do want to add that this is really a testament to how well you run your operation, Sheriff and Captain. You do an excellent job, and very much appreciate your hard work to keep every duck in a row. You're doing wonderful work.
Okay, I'm going to speak because I don't see another hand up. Really what this is a third-party confirmation of the work you do, Sheriff Harold and Captain Riley. So thank you for that. And thank you for dotting the I's and crossing the T's to make sure that we get these clean audits, because that's the best way to keep programs going. To Moss Adams, all I can say, and to Vice Chair Farr, is when I was younger, the last thing I ever wanted to be was to be used as an example. But I am wondering if you have a policy that when you use one of your clients as an example in conferences or with other clients, we get any discount on your services. It's a legit question.
That's a good question. Actually, having such a clean CAFR and good policies actually really does affect your audit fee. It does determine how much we would charge. And if we were walking into a mess, you might be charged twice as much.
Oh, that was a good comeback, Amanda. Thank you very much. Are there any other commissioner comments? Because no action is required on this item. Hearing and seeing none, thank you all so very much, and we are going to return. I'm sorry, Chair Harold.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I'll keep my comments real brief. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that's really already been said, but before this levy, we did not have the jail capacity to even hold significant violent offenders pretrial. As an example, in 2012, I was personally involved in investigating a murder in Oak Ridge where an individual bludgeoned someone else to death with a piece of firewood. And that individual was released pre-trial because we didn't have the capacity to keep them. So we've had the levy long enough now that we've been able to build on our correction services. I'm very, very proud of the services that we're able to provide now, things like the MAC grant and the Impacts grant. But I wanted just to take a quick second to remember what it was we were working with before this levy and the significant lack of resources we had, so much so that the entire Public Safety Coordinating Council, all of our partners, including the public defenders, community treatment organizations, recognized and identified that correction services was the priority to repair in Lane County for our public safety system, because defense attorneys didn't have an opportunity to visit with their clients because of the revolving door that we had at the jail because of the lack of capacity. So this levy is so important to our entire community, the entire public safety system. And this process that has been in place, the annual third-party verification, is so important. And I'm going to talk to you all commissioners later today about the Mohawk Valley. And I've been talking to community members a lot lately, and being able to talk through the fact that we have this levy that is annually verified, that we and the county is doing exactly what was promised, is really going a long ways to build back that trust that, as was pointed out previously, there are definitely folks in our community who still remember a time when trust was taken advantage of. And so this process is helping us build that back. And I have the privilege of getting to talk to community members about this process and why they should trust us to do exactly what we say we're going to do. So thanks for the brief moment there.
Captain Riley, did you want to say something?
No, sir. I was just saying thank you.
Chair Bernie, before we move off this, I do want to give a chance to Karen Gaffney. A significant portion of this work also involves youth services, and I know that your time with Karen Gaffney's changed a little bit with Steve Adams coming on the scene. So I did want to deprive you of having any update with Karen here.
Thank you, Greg. Actually, one of the commissioners reminded me of that, and I was going to say that.
Oh, super. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair Bernie and commissioners. And Greg, I actually am not worried at all about not having time. I believe the next item after this is mine, maybe the next two. I will take just a moment, though. I do think it's important to lift up for the public the important role that this levy plays for kids in our community. And I know that was mentioned in the audit presentation. I just want to underscore that the dollars that come from this public safety levy, we talked about it as a jail levy, but it really is a public safety levy that are invested in our services at the Phoenix program for treatment and at our detention program for our juvenile justice system, make a long-lasting impact in our community. So while it may not be pure prevention, because those youth certainly are already engaged in the juvenile justice system, it is a significant investment that the community makes in changing those lives so that those young people never darken the door of our jail moving forward. So I want to take just a moment to appreciate, of course, the board, but really the community who continues to renew this levy and sees the value of this work in improving public safety and particularly on the kids' side. So thank you, Chair Bernie, for just giving me a couple minutes.
Absolutely. And if I may, I will be leaving and Commissioner Trieger will be more than taking my place on the Youth Services Commission. But in one of the last meetings I was at, we were bemoaning the lack of resources for our nonprofit community to deal with the myriad of youth requirements and needs in our community. So there's actually, I don't believe, any way to quantify in dollar terms the significance of all of this. And I just wanted to make that statement because our time is up. Unless there are any other comments that need to be made on this item. Thank you all very much, and thank you for the report, Kevin and Amanda. Thank you. Thank you. We are going to return to item 6 and hear from someone we haven't heard from in quite a while. Item 6A, Order 21-01-26-01, in the matter of approving one contract, Department of the Treasury, and one amendment, Oregon Housing and Community Services, and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved action. And we have Karen Gaffney. Thank you. Can't hear you.
Darn it. Thank you. I was getting better about that. Good morning again, and thank you, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. These next two items are both relatively brief and similar. We'll take them one at a time. Both address contract extensions or new contracts in the Department of Health and Human Services. This first packet includes two exciting revenue contracts for us. And as you mentioned in the title, the first is to give authority to accept a little over $12 million in new rental assistance that will be coming into Lane County. So that is an exciting effort for us, for sure, and will be a big lift as we get the system back up and running again to really help those who are most needy in the community get access to those rental assistance dollars. So that's an exciting opportunity for us. And then the other contract is our master grant agreement with Oregon Housing and Community Services. And we are anticipating that we will get additional dollars this year against that. So we're asking today for expanded delegated authority to accept those additional dollars when those amendments come through. Happy to answer any questions on either of those.
Thank you. Are there questions from commissioners? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second. Go ahead. Trigger seconded.
Gosh, thank you. Actually, I wasn't quite sure. It has been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Discussion on the motion. This is order number 21-01-26-01 in the matter of approving one contract, Department of Treasury, and one amendment, Oregon Housing and Community Services, and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved contract. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The order 21-01-26-01 moved by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Trieger, has been approved unanimously. We are now moving to item 6B, Order 21-01-26-08 in the matter of approving one amendment with St. Vincent de Paul and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions. Commissioner Buck, did you want to make a statement?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to declare a conflict of interest. I am related to the Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul, so I will recuse myself from this particular vote, turn my camera and my microphone off. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. See, this is the first time the gavel hasn't been passed to me after Commissioner Buck makes that statement. Is there discussion from any commissioners on this item?
Chair Bernie, if I could just take a moment to describe this particular contract, because again, I think it's an exciting opportunity.
I apologize, please.
No, that's perfectly fine. As you all know, we're focused very much on addressing homelessness in our community. And so this additional contract is to provide delegated authority for us to bring an additional hotel on board as a part of our winter strategies effort. And this would provide the service component of that. So it's, again, an exciting opportunity for us. The solicitation hasn't closed, so we don't know which hotel and how many rooms yet, but this will give us authority to sign that service contract so that we can keep the process moving.
Their discussion, and I see Commissioner Trieger's hand.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Just a quick point of clarification, Ms. Gaffney. It does say on our materials, if I'm tracking, that it does name a location in the description in section A in the background analysis.
Let me look at that. What I know is the current contract has been for the location at the University Inn, where they've been for a couple months. And so I think the additional hotel may or may not be at that location. So I apologize. I didn't write this part of it, so let me just review that really quickly. But that's my...
Thank you. And that may be exactly what it is that this is just naming University Inn as where the services have been, but
Yes.
aren't really where they will. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Farr.
Only briefly to say, Ms. Gaffney, thank you to you, to Steve Manella, to your entire staff for our ongoing efforts on winter strategies. We started started winter strategies about perhaps 7 years ago. I remember it was in a Human Services Commission meeting that we had an initial discussion regarding winter strategies. And we started in, I think, November that year. Now, that wasn't the first time we addressed winter issues, but that's the first time we started calling it winter strategies. And since then, it's year round. We work year round in providing winter strategies, even though the work is done predominantly over the winter months. And your staff, and I could give you a litany of names of people who really put a great deal of time and have for a lot of years into our winter strategies program. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bozovich, anything? Okay. I only asked because I saw Commissioner Trieger's hand up again. I just wanted to be fair. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Yeah, quick follow-up. Do we know yet what is the vetting or the selection process for who is obviously there's more need than beds available through this particular program. So what will be the process for identifying folks who can take advantage of this opportunity?
That is a great question, Commissioner Trieger, and I'm going to try and be vague because I don't want to misspeak. I know that we have a team that works closely with our coordinated entry system in terms of addressing needs and prioritizing people based on those needs, and there really are a variety of dimensions that move through that system. I don't know in this particular project if we have identified particular criteria, and I know Vice Chair Farr and others, you've been working on this, so if you have additional details, feel free to chime in.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add, Ms. Gaffney and Commissioner Trieger, is that we rely on the service providers to do a certain amount of the vetting of who receives the initial rooms.
At this point, the chair would entertain a motion.
Chair Bernie. I move passage of order 21-01-26-08 in the matter of approving one amendment with St. Vincent de Paul and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions.
I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Trieger, and that being order 21-01-26-08. Is there further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Order 21-01-26-08. In the matter of approving one amendment with St. Vincent de Paul and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved action has been approved 4 votes to 0 with Commissioner Buck recusing herself. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney. And magically, we have Commissioner Buck, well, we had back with us. I believe now we're at the consent calendar. Normally, there's not discussion on this calendar. I would entertain either discussion or a motion. Commissioner Farr?
Chair Bernie, I move passage of the consent calendar for January 26, 2021.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Approval of the consent calendar for January 26th, 2021 has been moved by by Vice Chair Farr and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there discussion to the motion?
Point of clarification, Commissioner Buck provided the second.
You're right. Thank you, Commissioner Trieger. I apologize, Commissioner Buck. It's been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Buck that the consent calendar for January 26, 2021 be approved. And the vote was, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Unanimously approved. Commissioner Bozovich, please stop laughing. We are now at item 9, which we've been looking forward to. Discussion on the Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District formation with permanent tax. And I believe Sheriff Harold is here to discuss this item with us.
Thank you very much, Chair Bernie. I am excited to get to present this with you today. I think to start off, if I can remember, Diana Jones taught me something yesterday. I would like to start with this video.
So community policing is having a law enforcement officer in your area, where you live, where you reside, and you having somebody always in the area. Somebody's always stopped by the store, checking in on people, going to schools, checking in with the kids, knowing the students, knowing the teachers, knowing the superintendents, everybody in the area, and just having that resource that's there that you get to know on a first name basis.
Where maybe a larger city doesn't have the time because they're bouncing from call to call to really sit down with someone and toss around some ideas on how to deal with stuff or spend some additional time solving and resolving an issue. We really do have that time out here to deal thoroughly through everything.
I mean, it's the coolest job ever. You know, you get to help people. And in the community policing, not only do you get to know the players, but you also get to know the families that need help.
The biggest direction any of our contacts go is resolving them without anything having to go to a criminal level, anybody getting a citation or arrested for any reason. So most of the time, we can resolve issues civilly in a civil manner.
They have a vested interest in you as a person, and you have a vested interest in that community as well.
It helps us build relationships in the schools, from the elementary schools, the middle schools, to the high school, which I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of youngsters in the schools, which really leads to relationships to their families. And otherwise, those relationships wouldn't be built.
We're always there to talk to, and it doesn't have to be a law enforcement issue. Clearly, that's what we've been hired for, is to deal with certain things. But we're also kind of we're a big fixture in the community, whether it's a small town like Veneta or Cresswell.
Well, when they know your first name, you sit and talk with them for a while, have coffee with them.
I'll stop by like the coffee shops, sit down, and just have coffee with the locals. It's usually the elderly retired folks that love to talk and chat about the history of Veneta.
We've had a couple different runaway cases here in Veneta where young kids have run away, but through the vine talking to people, we can go from point A to point C to D and figure out where somebody has gone, particularly kids, when we're concerned about their safety and their health, and then be able to locate those individuals pretty quick.
So a good example of the community policing was recently we had a call from Red Bluff, California about an Amber Alert. And the information that I'd gotten at that point was that a mother had taken the daughter without permission and was headed to the Oregon area, and specifically the McKenzie Bridge area. So with that, I was able to kind of determine who it was and then where they might be going. And then I was able to make contact with the residents nearby. Being able to do that, they were able to tell me, yeah, this is who it is, and this is where they were at and where they were going and what they're driving, and a bunch of information about them. And they weren't in the area at the time. A day or two later, I started getting a couple phone calls saying they had seen that vehicle and they'd seen him in the area as well. So developing that community policing and the resources of being in the area, I started getting text messages of people saying, hey, I saw the vehicle here, I saw the vehicle there. We went to the address where the vehicle was seen currently and it wasn't there. However, one of the residents had said, hey, they mentioned going to a certain guy's house and I have no idea who that was. Well, because of working in the area, I did know who that was. So we went right to that address, and sure enough, there they were. So we were able to recover the girl at that point.
I think the community policing aspect is a great program to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the citizens. In the political arena nowadays, the atmosphere out there is pretty jaded against law enforcement, and I think this is a great program to bring the citizens and law enforcement together.
I carry a football in the back of my vehicle, so it's pretty common for me to go down the road and see some kids out playing basketball or some kids out playing this or playing that, and I'll just stop in and throw football with them for a few minutes, and they can see me on a more of a personal level than as a law enforcement figure kind of thing. It's like, and they always ask, my name, and I always tell them what my first name is, and that's what I want them to call me as. So you start building relationships that way too with the kids and stuff, and they're able to come to you and feel comfortable, and they're always waving as they go by instead of living in fear of a police officer.
I think it is a great program, and I think other areas of Lane County would benefit from this program.
All right. So what we're here to talk about today is the idea of bringing that type of service model to our rural communities, and it would be actually more accurately bringing that type back to our more rural communities, specifically the Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District idea. Long-term contracts with the city of Cresswell and Veneta have given the Sheriff's Office a consistent example of what community policing looks like, the extremely valuable benefits of building relationship with the community and being able to work on the community's desired initiatives. In this photo, and I should point out these are not recent photos, top center we have Sergeant Scott Denham. He's a full-time supervisor assigned to the Cresswell contract, paid for by the city of Cresswell, and he functions very much like the police chief for the city of Cresswell. He supervises 4 deputies. He participates in city council meetings. He coordinates events like Cresswell's National Night Out and monthly coffee with a cop opportunities, even when coffee shops haven't been able to be open in our current times. He will put himself out at the public park on a nice day for people to swing by and check in with him. In that lower left photo, you see Deputy Andrew Brooks. This was Cresswell National Night Out in 2019. And this photo was taken either just shortly before or just after he had gone and submitted himself to an hour of sitting in the dunk tank. I was there that evening watching, and I can tell you he didn't actually get to do very much sitting in the dunk tank. He did a lot of climbing back onto the seat as the youngsters made sure that he kept going into the water. In the bottom center there, you have a couple of our Elmira High School seniors who went looking for Veneta contract deputies to ask them to take a photo with them to commemorate their graduation. And then on the far right, you have Deputy Mike Hudson. He was surprised with a visit from these two youngsters. They stopped by Veneta City Hall just to present him with a bouquet of flowers, just to brighten his day. So community policing is, as you've heard, this opportunity to build relationships with the community, to work on things that the community feels are important for us to work on. It's having the ability to do more than just respond to in-progress life safety issues, which is what most of our main office patrol is doing throughout their shift across the 4,600 square miles of our county. And we really, in the community policing model, we get the opportunity to proactively deal with some behaviors before they actually become a criminal event. And you heard Deputy Hudson speak to that, that we can actually get pulled in and problem solve before something becomes a criminal matter. And we oftentimes can solve criminal matters because of community help, input, and information. And you heard in the video Deputy Russ Olson sharing an example regarding 7-year-old Emily Perry. She was taken in October from her home in Red Bluff, California by her biological mother, who did not have any parental rights to her. Red Bluff officials believe that the mother may travel to the McKenzie Valley area. Now, Russ was the last deputy that we had assigned to a resident deputy program up to McKenzie and Mohawk. And because of that, because of the relationships he built, and because he's currently assigned up there as one of our 2 McKenzie River Valley deputies, Russ was able to be a specific and a direct point of contact for the Red Bluff officials, both law enforcement and child protective services. He was able to go out and proactively visit with community members about this case. The community, because they know Russ, they began contacting him when they saw or thought they may have seen something that was important to the case. And when Russ arrived, because of that information and the vehicle was gone, community members were able to give him a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. Russ had other pieces of the puzzle just from his other relationships in the community, which led them to the location where this 7-year-old was then able to be returned to safety with her rightful custodian. So the question I have to ask is, well, if we didn't have those 2 McKenzie resident deputies, if Russ wasn't assigned just up there, how would we have dealt with this call? And unfortunately, the reality is Red Bluff would have called us. Our dispatchers would have taken as much information as possible. They would have documented that. It would have gone on a briefing board that the main office deputies, they come into the office for briefing at the beginning of their shift. They would have heard about this information. The reality is after they left briefing, they would have somewhere between 10 to 20 calls pending for them. And they would start working on those pending calls and taking whatever in-progress life safety calls were coming in. There wouldn't have been the proactive contact with the community members. There wouldn't have been a deputy to drive up there and make that contact. And if a community member, let's say they had heard about this case on the news and they thought they saw something that was maybe related, if they didn't have a relationship with Russ, would they call the sheriff's office, or would they convince themselves that maybe it wasn't actually related or it wasn't that important? But since they know Russ and they can shoot him a text, that's a pretty easy process to do. If they did contact the main office, would we have had a deputy to respond up there? If we did respond up there with a main office deputy, but the suspect vehicle was gone, what next? Well, the main office deputy would have been dispatched to the next in-progress call. And ultimately, we would have left the area probably without finding Emily. Can't speak enough to the value of having these specific deputies assigned to specific areas for our communities. And you heard Russ say this was over a few days. And so again, if you didn't have a specific deputy, maybe the main office gets involved over the course of a few days. It's not going to be the same deputy each time. It's going to be whoever is available for that call at the time. It's a real game changer to have somebody assigned specifically to that area. This story is just one of many that have already been experienced by our McKenzie River and West Lane deputies that started in October of last fall. You may have recently seen the story of the arrest of 2 individuals for theft related to a fire-related property up in McKenzie. That case would not have been resolved if we didn't have specific deputies there. And shortly after we got our West Lane deputies assigned, we were able to connect with a property owner around a chronic trespassing issue that had been going on for months, actually maybe years. The property owner had tried to contact the chronic trespasser. The contact didn't go well. The property owner feared for their safety. And this individual just kept coming back to a property that was not theirs and they were not welcome on. Having a deputy assigned to West Lane, we were able to go contact the property owner. The trespassing actually wasn't in progress, but we We went and contacted the property owner, got some information. Our deputy actually found the trespasser in Florence, in town, was able to make contact, make sure they understood that they were trespassing and not welcome to go back there. And then the deputy was able to return to the property owner and share that information with them. Seems like kind of a small thing, but for a property owner who has felt like there's nobody there to help them for months or years with this issue, it's a really, really big deal. And the reality is it's a big deal to our deputies because that's the type of service we really want to be able to provide, but oftentimes just don't have the ability to in the main office. So obviously there's overwhelming evidence that community policing is a best practice model. I think we've known that for a while. Back in the 90s, which is actually when I first became associated with the Sheriff's Office, we had a robust program that allowed us to engage in community policing in our rural unincorporated communities in Lane County. This program assigned specific deputies to specific communities over a period of time, allowing the deputies to build those community relationships and provide an effective and efficient service. One additional advantage, as you've heard from, again, Deputy Hudson in the video, oftentimes early intervention into an issue allows a resolution that doesn't involve the criminal justice system. Sometimes early intervention looks like catching an individual after they've only committed one burglary instead of 20. This allows for 19 fewer victims. It also allows the possibility of a corrective application of the criminal justice system that maybe isn't a decade in prison. What we find is that if we don't have the early intervention, by the time someone is caught, they maybe have the 20 burglary cases against them, which most likely results in a much longer prison sentence rather than an early intervention opportunity to try and steer them away from a path of criminality. So we had this program in the 90s. Timber revenues started to go away in the 90s. And as those timber revenues went away, so did the resident deputy positions over a period of time. Here you have some testimony from deputies who were assigned previously to the Mohawk Valley as a resident deputy. In addition to these two statements, I've also had the opportunity to visit with a lot of the residents out of the Mohawk Valley lately. I've been making a lot of phone calls to have conversations with them. One story that was shared with me just a couple of weeks ago was from a gentleman who's now retired, but at the time he was in the middle of his career as a driver for Greyhound bus lines. And he recalled the time when their house in the Mohawk Valley was broken into and burglarized, but he was on the road and he was unable to come home. His wife reported the burglary to the sheriff's office, and not only did the resident deputy come out, take the burglary report, but also went back into town, gathered up the supplies needed, and came back to the house to install a deadbolt lock on the door of the house. This was particularly moving for the homeowner because he was unable to be home to do that. And so both he and his wife just really appreciated that level of service. And again, that's the building the relationships with the community part. This is a slide that I think the commissioners are all familiar with, but it shows the decline in available funds to provide county services, and in particular, county public safety services. As a reminder, from 2008 to 2012, the Sheriff's Office lost 200 positions and laid off 100 staff members. In 2009, we applied for a COPS grant for community policing, a federal grant. We requested funding for 5 deputy sheriffs with the idea of placing them back out in communities as resident deputies for community policing model. The grant opted to fund us for 3 deputy sheriff positions. The funding was for 3 years with a requirement that the 4th year be funded by the receiving agency. And so we were able to field 3 resident deputies. We went from having a deputy in the Mohawk Valley and 2 in the McKenzie River Valley to having just 1 for that entire district. Excuse me. Just 1 deputy for South Lane County and 1 deputy for West Lane County. Recognizing the great value in these positions, we endeavored to keep them staffed for a few years, even after the grant funding ran out. However, ultimately, in order to continue to meet our minimum staffing for countywide emergency response, and in accordance with our Lane County Community Public Safety Repair Plan, we had to bring those positions back inside of the main office. And so they were lost once again to those communities. For a few years, the Sheriff's Office operated with a dark period where there were no deputy sheriffs on duty for up to 8 hours a night. 24-hour patrols were restored, providing for minimum staffing to cover 3 shifts generally 3 deputies and a sergeant on duty. During graveyard hours, we will drop down to 2 deputies and a sergeant. And obviously that's covering mountains to ocean, and that's our existing staffing level today. The public safety repair plan was originally an effort that was led by then District Attorney Alex Gardner to demonstrate the significant needs and to make a joint strategic plan within county departments related to public safety. It has since been adjusted into a wider perspective document that encompasses the larger system as a whole, rather than just those pieces that rely on county budget. The plan is edited and brought to the Board of Commissioners annually now as a coordinated effort from the Public Safety Coordinating Council. I talked to that just briefly during the levy presentation, that this entire system, public safety system, through our Public Safety Coordinating Council, has identified the deficiencies in the system and identified the fact that the system really is, there are hydraulics involved in the system, the way that the system is reliant on each different piece of it functioning. And so the plan in its most recent update, again, the Public Safety Coordinating Council has announced that all areas of the public safety system have entered some portion of phase 2 of the plan, which is addressing critical system needs, with the exception of Wayne County's rural law enforcement response. So for the last many years, the Sheriff's Office has heard from community members in unincorporated Lane County wanting to know how to get an improved level of service. They want to get back to that community policing model that we once had in the 90s. Most of these meetings have been in the McKenzie River Valley, the Mohawk Valley, and then both near and far West Lane County. And by that, I mean near West Lane County, Fern Ridge area, Bonita, etc. And the far West Lane County area, we've had meetings down in Dune City and the unincorporated area around Florence. We've also had opportunities to speak in meetings with unincorporated Santa Clara, as well as residents down in South Lane County. Here we have a timeline as far as Sheriff's Office public community meetings with respect to our system. In 16, the Board of Commissioners held a meeting in Fern Ridge about public safety. In February of 18, the Sheriff had a meeting out in the Mohawk Valley about lack of patrols and the need for increased traffic safety. That was at the request of the citizens out there. In April of 18, the Sheriff spoke at a town hall meeting in Dune City regarding our public safety system. In May of 2019, this Sheriff, I was invited to speak to the residents of the McKenzie River Valley on how to increase patrols in their area. Again, they are familiar with this, having a resident deputy, not having a resident deputy, and they want to know how do they get back to having one. So in 2019, 2020, at the community's request, myself and the folks in my office, we focused a lot of time and energy on potentially forming a law enforcement district in the McKenzie River Valley area, and had a lot of community outreach to that end. In September of 2020, as you all know, the Holiday Farm Fire destroyed hundreds of homes and multiple businesses in the McKenzie River Valley. And in October of 2020, the board approved 5 years of funding for 2 deputies in the McKenzie River Valley to help with the unique needs that that community has as they begin to recover and rebuild, and 2 deputies to address the unique needs, specifically the geographical needs of serving West Lane County. So what we've learned through all this community meetings and community interaction is that temporary solutions have resulted in unstable service delivery and community frustration. This is really evident during my conversations with community members in the unincorporated communities that have had that experience of having a resident deputy assigned, and then the deputy is pulled back because of lack of funding, and then we reassign them because we got the grant, and we pulled them back because there's lack of funding. We also know that recruiting and retaining the highest quality employees can be difficult without stable funding, and that our community members are looking for a more permanent solution. So I'm incredibly grateful to the Board of Commissioners for the addition of the deputies to the McKenzie River Valley and the West Lane County area over the course of the next 5 years. And I am hearing time and time again from community members how much they are appreciating and grateful for that as well. I've said in a few venues, but I think a lot of our patrol staff are sort of living vicariously through those 4 deputies because of the type of work they're getting to do right now, being assigned to a designee. Having those deputies assigned has allowed us to focus on a third community that continues to express desire for increased law enforcement presence, which is the Mohawk Valley. In addition to the previously mentioned community meetings, I've attended recently a Mohawk Valley Fire Department board meeting. I'm scheduled for a Mohawk School District board meeting. in early next month. I've been in Zoom meetings with interested community members, and I've made a whole lot of phone calls. The overwhelming majority of the folks that I've been visiting with are enthusiastic about this possibility of establishing a law enforcement district that will provide them with an assigned deputy and enable us to deploy the community policing model that they've experienced in the past. What I hear from the community most often, that the things that they like the most about this idea, one is that there would be a deputy available to respond with their fire department on calls that require a law enforcement response. In unincorporated Lane County, oftentimes fire departments are staging a safe distance away, waiting for law enforcement to get on a scene to make sure it's safe before they can come in and render aid. And you can imagine that that's very frustrating for them, since they deploy from the community. They're much faster than we are, and then they're waiting and causes them anxiety and frustration. The community members have also talked a lot about how they'd love to have somebody be able to pay attention to the traffic safety concerns on Marcola Road. Marcola Road is always in the top 10 in Lane County for serious injury crashes, and Lane County is always one of the top 1 or 2 in the state for fatality crashes. They like the idea that somebody would be able to follow up on property crimes. And right now, a lot of our community members in unincorporated Lane County, they sort of think, why bother calling the sheriff about a property crime? Because they know that it's not likely to get very much follow-up. The community likes the idea that there would be somebody visible in their community. We talk about that idea of them driving around in a car that says sheriff on the side and then Mohawk Valley underneath that. So that is that direct connection to the community. And they like the idea that if this district is formed, there's a very visible direct connection to the tax related to the service. It's specifically for their particular community. So what is a law enforcement district? We don't currently have any in Lane County. A law enforcement district is a designated area formed for the purpose of providing law enforcement services specific to that area. We provide stable funding approved by the voters, consistent level of service, and services that can be tailored to the community because there's somebody out there that has the time and ability to do that. This proposal meets the goals of the Lane County Strategic Plan, the Public Safety Coordinating Council Public Safety Repair Plan, and is supported by the Safe Lane Transportation Coalition, which consists of LCOG, LTD, Eugene, Springfield, ODOT, Lane County, Veneta, BEST, and the Lane Education Service District. All of these members recognize that enforcement is essential to reducing fatal and severe injury crashes in Lane County, and that Lane County needs additional enforcement resources in order to save lives and reduce suffering related from these crashes. So based on the information that we've obtained from Lane County Assessment and Taxation, a permanent tax rate of 48 cents per thousand of assessed value would fund one deputy sheriff assigned to the Mohawk Valley District for the foreseeable future. For the median assessed value home out there in the proposed district, this equates to $10.12 per month. If referred to the voters by the Board of Commissioners and passed by the voters, the boundaries of the Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District would be the same as the current Mohawk Valley Rural Fire District. So moving forward, last October, as part of the Board of Commissioners' action to provide the 5 years of funding for the deputies for the McKenzie River Valley and West Lane County, the Board of Commissioners requested an update from the Sheriff's Office within the next 2 years on a plan for sustainable funding for law enforcement services in unincorporated Lane County. I'm pleased to be here a little bit sooner than 2 years as a result of community request and input, as well as input from our public safety partners. We're recommending that the board refer measure to the May 2021 ballot for formation of the Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District with a permanent tax rate of 48 cents per thousand of assessed value. A little bit of a timeline for moving forward, the presentation to you all today. You have a couple of regularly scheduled board meetings the next 2 Tuesdays, which would provide additional opportunity for public input. And the board has already previously ordered, announced, and we have posted a public hearing regarding the formation of a district. That public hearing is scheduled for February 16th. The Sheriff's Office currently has a webpage information available for community members regarding this proposal. And the page and all the information on it has already received safe harbor from the Oregon Secretary of State. I intend to will, as I mentioned, be going to a virtual school board meeting for the community out there. And we'll continue making my phone calls to the folks who live out there in the district to continue to visit with them about this. So with that, that is the presentation on the proposal for a Mohawk Valley Law Enforcement District. Happy to hear any questions from the commissioners, and thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Sheriff. I would, before we get questions, just remind the board that there's no motion on this item, but the Sheriff's Office is seeking direction on next steps. I believe the Sheriff could not be more precise in identifying what he would like those next steps to be. I would also like to remind the board that when we in October approved dipping into reserves for the officers the Sheriff referred to in this area, we amended that motion before it was voted to say within 2 years, please come back with a permanent finance structure. Not because 2 years was magic, but because this board felt very strongly that we needed to structure in a permanent presence as the Sheriff has described. So with that context, are there commissioner questions, discussion? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Since the Mohawk Valley is in my district, I wanted to raise my hand here to just express my thanks to the Sheriff for putting this together so quickly, even though I know there's a lot of built up time and talking with the community before this. And you continue to make calls and get out there in the community. This is an excellent proposal. I hope my fellow commissioners agree and we'll be able to move this along. We've had overwhelming public support that I've seen coming in emails and phone calls. So people out there in the Valley know this is happening. And I've only seen folks thrilled about the possibility of having a deputy sheriff in their area. Haven't heard one person even hint at not being supportive of this particular potential item. So I just want you to know, Sheriff, that you have my full cooperation and support in this effort. And if there's any place that you feel I can be of assistance throughout this process, please let me know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. And I'm happy to hear about the resident support, because that's really going to be important for my decision to place it on the ballot, is to know that there is support out there in the community. Because we kind of had that hiccup in trying to do firmly public safety district, where we got out there and found out there wasn't universal support. Two quick questions that I'd like to answer, and they don't have to be answered today. I'd like to know what the annual estimate of revenue collected will be at that 48 cents per thousand for the district, which I'm sure you can work with our assessor Coles about and have a number for us. And then also if there's any compression created if this passes, and then what the impacts on other districts would be due to that compression.
I can answer the second question right now. There is no compression or compaction issue in the district. And I have this temptation to give you the number that I think I remember for the total, but I'm going to resist and make sure that I give you an accurate number.
Good move, Sheriff. Commissioner Bozovich demands accuracy. Are there other comments or questions? Or were you through, Commissioner Bozovich?
I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Oh, just a recital of quotes that I've written down that really are part of the excitement of this particular type of a district. The first thing that you said is it provides early intervention that provides resolution outside of the criminal justice system. You know, that's what we're all looking for, is keeping people out of jail. And the best way to do that is to help them make decisions to not do things that that potentially could place them in jail. But the second thing is that you also talk about saving lives and reducing suffering. Both of those are quotes directly from you, Sheriff Harold, and I've heard you say both of those things before. Regarding saving lives and suffering, it's not just on the highways, Sheriff Harold. I see you every month at the Mental Health Summit. I also see Captain Riley every month at the Mental Health Summit. And you talk about steering people away from jail, finding ways to reduce bookings in the jail. And I personally see this as an opportunity for the personalized service that the men and women of the Sheriff's Department provide to help not only identify ways to keep people from doing additional burglaries, but if people have underlying issues, behavioral health issues, actually knowing the families and knowing the people individually can provide. Can you talk about that ever so briefly? We don't have a great deal of time, but it's something I hear you talk about all the time, Sheriff Harold.
Yeah, I'd love to. And, you know, we have folks struggling with mental health issues and drug addiction issues, certainly in our unincorporated communities. One of the things, in fact, I was sharing a story recently, maybe been 2 weeks ago. I was on my way into the office and I was listening to two of our patrol deputies dealing with an issue in unincorporated Santa Clara. And there's a particular individual that struggles with mental health issues. He comes to jail frequently, typically involved with the city of Eugene. And he oftentimes spends enough days in our jail to get stabilized. He leaves the jail actually better than he arrived. But it's sort of a nonstop through the door because his mental health issues cause him to act outside of our public safety laws. He's out in traffic and he's causing alarm. And what I listened to is our deputies who had worked in the jail before, are very familiar with this individual. They worked really hard to find a solution that wasn't jail. And I was hearing them on the radio talk about it. And then a state trooper who had heard the call was volunteering to help. And the deputies, knowing that the trooper wouldn't know this individual the way they did, radioed to the trooper to make sure that they knew that they were making some plans to try and do something other than just arrest an individual who kept obstructing traffic. So proud of our deputies for the way that they do that and the way that they try to find a better resolution than jail for that particular event. And if you think about a deputy being assigned to a community like Mohawk Valley, becoming familiar with folks who have those sorts of struggles, having that knowledge ahead of time versus just whoever gets dispatched to a call. Oftentimes the details to a call for service are minimal. Somebody drove by on Marcola Road and they saw somebody acting bizarrely, and that's all the deputy knows when they get dispatched. But if you have a deputy that's familiar with an area and familiar with the community, they get to know folks, they have enough foreknowledge to do a little bit of greater planning rather than just sort of show up and go straight to the very clear solution, which is I'll make an arrest for disorderly conduct. So absolutely, we see this benefit in Cresswell and Veneta. We see this benefit anywhere where we're able to deploy this community policing model versus having deputies just going from call to call. Find the fastest solution you can so that you can get on to the next call.
Thank you, Sheriff. Everybody, thank you, Sheriff Harold.
Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And thank you for making a point to call and connect with me. We had a good beginning conversation about your work broadly and about this initiative specifically. And I'm looking forward to the next couple of meetings where we have more public comment opportunity. I've read all the testimony that's been forwarded to us, found it very compelling. And to be clear, I understand what we're being asked to do is to give the voters of this district the opportunity to say what they want and what they need and how they want to address this problem. And so I know we're not being asked to make a decision today, but I want you to know I am very much supportive of letting a local community make that kind of decision for themselves. I have two very specific questions, and one is just kind of operational, and it might actually, if you can answer it, perhaps Administrator Mokrahajski can, and then one broader just sort of topic I want to express something about. My two questions. One is the position would be fully funded by the revenue brought in by the levy, but I wonder if there are other associated costs, even if they're one-time costs. Essentially, you're putting it on the ballot. administrative costs and so on, and what those might be is my first, hopefully simple question.
Yeah, so I assume there probably would be some costs for the county to put it on the ballot. I can't speak to what those costs are, but I guess I would suggest that the benefit countywide, even though there's a specific benefit to this community, it's also a countywide benefit to relieve pressure on the 3 deputies that are crisscrossing the county. And I think it's part of the Lane County strategic plan to move in this direction to provide a better level of public safety service to Lane County. With respect to one-time costs directly related to the service, for example, the purchase of an additional patrol car, a laptop, 2 radios, etc. We have built some of that in, and we believe that within the sheriff's office budget, we might have some reserves that we would use initially to make that initial purchase. But in the early years, the district could repay that as we project out, costs increasing over the next 6, 7 years. In the early years, the district would be able to pay for that. I'll turn it over to anybody else that wants to speak to the cost to the ballot process.
Commissioner or Chair Bernie, this is Steve Engel. With your permission, I can provide a little more specific information to Commissioner Trigger's question. It's in the statute that deals with special district formation. Would that be all right, Chair?
That would be great. Thank you.
So the way it works is the special districts are formed under ORS Chapter 198 and 451, and ORS 198-845 specifically covers the costs of district formation. And what it provides is that the county shall bear the cost of the formation or attempted formation of a district. However, if the district is formed, the county or the district shall reimburse the county for any expenses incurred by the county in making necessary preliminary engineering studies and surveys. I don't believe there's any of that here. So essentially what it would be is that the county would do this, but as I think what the sheriff said, I don't think there's anything that prohibits the district from repaying the county for those costs over time.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. I believe Commissioner Trigger, it's still your floor.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And thank you for that answer. My other specific question before I make a sort of a global comment is when you and I spoke, Sheriff, you shared with me a little bit about the nature of the majority of the calls your deputies get now, and because of how you have to triage with such limited resource, the kinds of things that go unaddressed, that this would help not only the residents of the Mohawk Valley have their needs met, but will free up resource, as you were mentioning earlier, for your deputies to address elsewhere in the county. Can you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, currently, as I mentioned, property crimes are really unaddressed very well within unincorporated Lane County. We do still ask the community, oftentimes, to fill out a citizen self-report form. We still really value the information that comes in on those, and they do get reviewed by either a shift supervisor or some of our deputies that work in the courthouse. If there's a lull between their activity in delivering in-custody individuals to court hearings, etc., they'll do a review, and they do some follow-up on property crimes. But again, it's a very minimal amount of ability to do that. Whereas a deputy that was specifically assigned to the area, they would get any report of activity that goes on in the district. If it happened when they weren't on duty, they would get a report of that, they would get information about that, and they would have the ability to follow up on those sorts of things. And, what we find is folks who are engaged in criminal behavior, they're not limited to city limits or districts. And so oftentimes Eugene, Springfield detectives are working on really prolific property crime offenders who are going all over the county stealing stuff. And oftentimes they're looking for a connection to somebody in the sheriff's office to tie in cases that occurred outside of the city. And we really struggle to give them anyone. And to do that follow-up on the victims who live in an unincorporated Lane County. So to that end, if this was occurring in an assigned district like this, we would have an assigned resource for that. And then two, when the deputy is on duty, any of the calls that are happening in that district, that's fewer calls that are pending for the 3 minimum staffing centralized response deputies.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I think the need is really, our understanding of the need is skewed by people being discouraged, getting discouraged and not reporting because of the historically slow response. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So finally, Chair Bernie, thank you for one more moment on with the floor. I just wanted to share, particularly, it was already on my mind, and then in the video, one of your team member mentions that the public is a bit jaded about law enforcement, I think was the comment. And I think, we're having really important conversations nationally and locally about law enforcement, about the role of law enforcement, about criminal justice system. I know particularly nationally and here locally, that's focused primarily on municipal police departments, different structure, different history, different funding mechanisms. But I do think, and I appreciate again, Sheriff Harold, when you and I spoke one-on-one, we sort of started this conversation a little bit. I just think it's important that we as a board have these hard conversations, and I have faith that we can, that we talk about this in the broader context of a sort of national reckoning and awakening to the role of law enforcement as members of our community and what we ask of them and how they are responding and what the needs are that they're being asked to address that really ultimately and eventually would be better served by not having the needs addressed by the response of someone who's armed from a law enforcement agency. So again, I just really appreciate you being open to the start of that conversation that you and I had in our one-on-one, and look forward to this board finding the right time and place and way to tackle that in a broader philosophical way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sheriff, I know you have a methodology and there's a ton of reasons why you've come up with this, but I just have to ask you the question, why are you looking at one officer instead of more than one officer when you're looking at this issue of moving forward?
Yeah, well, taking a look at the way we deployed the 10 that we had back in 1990, we had one assigned to the Mohawk Valley district. We had a lower McKenzie and an upper McKenzie. We had a lower Highway 58 and upper Highway 58. A couple down in South Lane County, a couple over in West Lane County, one up in Junction City. So we took a look at that, the type of service that one deputy assigned to this district was able to provide, that community building connection. And the other important piece too is that deputy and their relationships really open up a portal of communication to the office so that the entire office can serve that community more efficiently because of the more efficient communication. So as far as workload goes, we believe that a deputy is going to be able to make just a tremendous difference to that community. And then of course too, we're cognizant of the fact that many of the members who live in unincorporated Lane County enjoy a much lower property tax rate than folks who live inside an incorporated city. And I can speak to having gotten to talk to a whole lot of folks that live out there, and they do want to not pay more taxes in general. But I can tell you repeatedly, as we've had that conversation with folks that don't want to pay higher taxes, what's attractive to them about this proposal is the idea that it would be a direct thing in their community that they would put their eyes on. So all of those things really went into trying to keep it at a rate that was reasonable, $10 a month for a median assessed home. And the return for that dollar, I think, is just going to be tremendous if we're successful in doing it.
Thank you, sir. And then another question, this is speculation, but nonetheless, if this model is successful, is this something you see applicability for other parts of Lane County in?
I sure do. Thanks for asking that question. In fact, the Mohawk Valley Fire Chief is really excited about this idea. And he shared it, I think, with some of his peers, chiefs of other rural fire districts. And so I've already had some folks reach out from other communities that want to know, hey, we've heard there's this idea from Mohawk Valley. How do we get signed up to have you pursue that? So that's just exactly the sorts of conversations I want to have. I definitely am, aware of my limits, one person, and how much I can give of myself to running the office and taking this on. but I do think so. I think that we're going to be able to demonstrate some real success, and I think other areas of the county will be interested in taking a look at it as well.
Well, and I can tell you as someone that's a parent of a son that's been in law enforcement, as you know, he and many of his peers were hungry for the kind of community interaction that this will in fact enable. I've assessed that every board member has in essence articulated being favorable for you moving forward with this as you've proposed. Am I incorrect in that? Are there any board members that see anything different? In that case, Sheriff, unless there's more you want to say, I think we're good.
I want to provide the other answer to Commissioner Bozovich because I have an awesome staff who texted it to me.
Okay.
That would have raised in this current year $181,603.
Forgive me, I know this is Commissioner Bozovich's question, but given the tragedy that occurred and the impact on property values, is that a real number, do you think?
Well, I think so for the Mohawk Valley, because while they were certainly impacted by evacuation notices and significant danger from the fire, I'm unaware of any real property damage out there.
Commissioner, did you want to follow up? It was your question that Sheriff answered.
That makes sense to me, and I was just trying to get an idea whether it matched up with my mental estimate of what 1 FTE, car, equipment, training, et cetera, supervision comes to. And it's saying that's about the right number.
So, Sheriff, you get kudos because your real number matched Commissioner Bozovich's mental estimated number. Is there any other discussion on this item? Go forth. Thank you very much, Sheriff, and thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you all.
We are on number 10. There is no executive session this morning, I have been told. Is that correct, Mr. Mokrahysky?
That's correct.
Before we recess our morning for this meeting, is there any other business? Steve, no?
No, sorry, I wasn't sure who you were directing that to. No, there's no other business.
Everyone I can see on my screen. If anyone, commissioners or our CAO have no other business, we are adjourned until 1:30. Recessed, excuse me. We are recessed until 1:30. Thank you.